Welcome to session 5 of the PayPal story. So in the previous session, session 4, we talked about settling down. I had joined X.com in September of 1999 and relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast. So there was the whole process of settling down in a fast-paced startup, settling down in a new town. So that entire process, it's very important that if you're going to be successful at disruptive innovation, you're well settled and can deal with all the stuff. So if you want to learn more about that, you can look at the last session. And then we also covered the merger between Confinity and X.com, which happened in early 2000. So let's move on to the session. So on March 10th, 2000, the NASDAQ was at its peak and then started falling. So there was a dot-com bubble or dot-com boom, if you could call it, till early 2000, but then it started falling. Now, X.com was fortunate that it closed a round of $100 million just after the NASDAQ started falling. So I think on April 5th, 2000, it closed the round, the NASDAQ started falling on March 10th. So when the NASDAQ started falling and the dot-com bubble was threatening to become a dot-com bust, PayPal had a reasonable war chest, but it was also burning through this war chest very rapidly, because every transaction that a person did, if they funded it with a credit card, PayPal lost 1.9%. If they funded it from a bank account, PayPal lost a little less. But because PayPal was free, it was not making much money. People thought that PayPal could make money off the float, but that was quite incorrect. Also, one of the good things was that the volumes of PayPal were growing quite a lot. And PayPal had very correctly identified eBay power sellers as their beachhead. And there's a little bit of an interesting story around that. So eBay had its own competing service called BillPoint. And when there were power sellers on eBay, they used to list maybe up to 1,000 auctions a day, because if an item came off auction, then 10 minutes later, they wanted it to go back on auction. So eBay had an offline tool, which they called Turbo Lister, which these power sellers used to use. Now, eBay would not give PayPal access to the offline tool. So if power sellers wanted to use PayPal as their payment system and put the PayPal payment mark on their listing, then if they were using Turbo Lister, they couldn't put this mark on automatically. And if they had to go in and insert the mark on every listing, that would be a lot of work and they wouldn't do it. So we needed a creative solution. And because the PayPal technical team was top-notch, they came up with a solution where if the power seller gave us their password, we could go in and insert the PayPal payment mark on their listings, but then we would have to be continually monitoring the eBay site. And eBay couldn't stop us from doing that unless we crashed the site. So once we did crash the site, but then we sent them a lot of pizzas, and with the sort of antitrust regulations and so on. So eBay, even though they didn't like PayPal at all, and they had a competing service called BillPoint, they could not stop PayPal. Now, also then, for us, we wanted to make sure that eBay power sellers preferred PayPal to BillPoint, and therefore we were almost on a mission to try and kill BillPoint. Okay. So the other big problem that PayPal had to solve was the trust problem, because now you can have buyers on PayPal or people buying on eBay or any other platform where they're using PayPal as a payment method, and they could be deadbeat buyers. By that, what we mean is that they just place an order, the seller ships the items, but they don't pay, or whatever payment method they've used, it kind of bounces, or they charge back the payment on the card saying, I never ordered this. So you could have a fair number of deadbeat buyers. And the other problem was deadbeat sellers. So you could have sellers who made a fake listing, and a person made a payment and they never shipped the goods, or they shipped goods which were not as per the listing. So this problem of, how do you solve this trust thing on the internet was a very big problem. And we will have a session on how PayPal actually solved this problem. And that was very key to PayPal becoming a successful company. Now, Elon wanted to solve the deadbeat sellers problem by saying that, if the seller has been operating for a little while on PayPal, making payments through PayPal, then it's kind of fine. We can call them a verified seller. And if they are a deadbeat seller, then we can protect the buyer. And PayPal would essentially stand for the seller. But a lot of us in the company were very concerned that that would create a huge financial burden on PayPal, because we had seen cases where a person had kind of listed listing saying Nintendo box being shipped, but he had done it very nicely so that a person could get fooled into thinking that they were going to get a Nintendo when the seller was only going to ship the Nintendo box. So cases like this, now, if you had a thing saying that, look, if there is a seller, then, if they have shipped as per the listing, then we are not going to pay. But if they're not shipped per the listing, we will pay. It's fine. I mean, PayPal could say that, look, this guy said that you were going to get a box, and you got a box, and you didn't get the Nintendo. But because the consumers would say that then the site is not good enough, you should stop this, and so on and so forth. So those were the kind of disputes that we would get into. And remember, this was the very, very early days of the internet. And even now you can see how, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all get into trouble when their platform is misused. So we wanted to get away from this kind of problem. So how did we solve this? And so Elon's solution, fortunately, was never put into practice. In fact, because of this, Elon being very aggressive, people thought he didn't understand the business very well. And also he wanted to move the technology, I think, onto a Microsoft platform, which the technical people in PayPal were very much against. The CTO, who was really very good, Max Levchin, was dead set against that happening and said that he would leave if he was pushed to do that. So there were all kinds of conflicts between Elon, the X.com management team, and the Confinity management team, though X.com had acquired Confinity. So the PayPal people actually managed to convince the board, which included the person from Madison Dearborn, Tim Hurd, who had led the $100 million round, that PayPal was not good for the company, and that Elon was not good for the company, and Elon had to step down as CEO, and Peter Thiel, who was the head of Confinity, became the interim CEO. And the name of the company was also changed from X.com PayPal to PayPal. So this was the, in some ways, a coup by the Confinity team. And all the people who were from X.com, including me, like the X.com veterans, were a bit of a threatened species, especially people on the management team. So with that, we'll end this session, and the story will continue in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.